My name is Eleanor Bennett. I'm 71 years old, and for 48 beautiful, ordinary, extraordinary years, I was married to the kindest, steadiest man this world has ever known. This morning, just like every morning since Thomas left us, I woke up before the sun, made coffee exactly the way he liked it, 2 sugars, a splash of cream, and carried my mug to the kitchen window. I've stood at that same window thousands of times, watching him back the truck out of the driveway, or tinker under the hood on Saturday mornings. But today the driveway was empty. The old forest green Ford was gone. My hand started trembling so violently that the mug slipped from my fingers and shattered across the tile floor. The sound echoed through the quiet house like a gunshot. For a moment I just stood there in my robe, staring at the broken pieces, the coffee spreading like a dark stain. My heart felt exactly the same way, shattered. If you're watching this right now and you've ever lost someone you loved more than life itself, only to have the last piece of them taken by the very people who should have protected it, then you already understand the kind of pain I'm talking about. Take a deep breath with me, friend. You're not alone in this. I never thought I'd be telling this story. I'm not the dramatic type. I've lived a quiet life here in the foothills of North Carolina. Raised 2 children, loved 1 man, kept a home that always smelled like fresh bread and engine oil. But sometimes life forces you to speak. Sometimes the only way to heal is to tell the truth about what really happened. That truck wasn't just a vehicle. It was our entire love story on wheels. The place where Thomas proposed. The place we brought both our babies home from the hospital. The place where he held my hand and took his last breath. And my own son, my firstborn, traded it away like it was nothing more than an old inconvenience. Also, his ambitious wife could have a luxury SUV. They thought I was too old, too heartbroken, too weak to fight back. They were wrong. Because Thomas knew his family better than any of us realized. He had been preparing for this moment for years in complete silence. And what the dealership found hidden behind the dashboard of that old truck changed everything. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever had to fight to keep what matters most to you, then stay with me. This is a story about quiet love that reaches beyond the grave. About betrayal that cuts deeper than anything else, and about a woman who finally remembered her own strength. I promise you, by the end of this, you might just look at your own life a little differently. So pull up a chair, dear friend. Grab your coffee or tea. This is my story and I'm finally ready to tell it. Thomas and I met in the spring of 1975. I was 20 years old, working as a receptionist at the county courthouse in Asheville. He was 23, broad-shouldered from years of construction work, with calloused hands and the gentlest eyes I'd ever seen. He drove that 1978 forest green Ford F-150 everywhere. It wasn't flashy. The paint had already started to fade in places, and there was a noticeable dent on the front left fender from helping his father haul lumber one rainy afternoon. But to Thomas, that truck represented everything he believed in: hard work, responsibility, and building something that would last. On our 3rd date, he picked me up in that very truck. I remember wearing a simple yellow sundress I had sewn myself. The sun was beginning to set as we drove up the winding roads toward the Blue Ridge Mountains. Halfway there, he pulled over at a quiet overlook, turned off the engine and took my hand. "Ellie," he said, his voice low and steady, "I don't have much to offer right now. I'm just a construction worker with an old truck and big dreams. But I promise you this, whatever I have, I'll take care of it with everything I've got. And if you'll let me, I'd like to take care of you the same way." That moment, sitting on the bench seat of that old Ford with the mountains painted orange and pink behind us, I knew I had found my person. 6 months later we were married. We drove away from our small reception with tin cans tied to the bumper, laughing like children as the truck rumbled down the road. That truck became the silent witness to every important chapter of our life together. When our son Michael was born, Thomas drove us home from the hospital going no faster than 15 miles per hour. He kept glancing in the rearview mirror every few seconds asking, "Is he breathing okay? Ellie, you sure he's okay?" I laughed through my exhaustion and told him his son was perfect, just like his father. 4 years later, little Lauren made the same careful journey home in that same truck. Thomas used to say, "A thing well loved doesn't wear out, Ellie. It just gets more character." He lived by those words. While other men traded in their vehicles every few years, Thomas maintained that Ford like it was part of the family. He rebuilt the engine himself in our driveway one summer. Painted it twice over the decades, always that same deep forest green with the white stripe down the side. To outsiders it was just an old pickup. To us it was home on wheels. It carried Christmas trees every December, their pine needles scattered across the bed for weeks. It hauled furniture when we moved into our first real house. It took us on weekend drives to the mountains when we needed to remember why we fell in love in the first place. If you've ever had one object in your life that holds decades of memories, good and bad, joyful and painful, then you understand what that truck meant to me. It wasn't just metal and rubber. It was love made visible. It was Thomas's promise kept day after day, year after year. Even after 48 years of marriage, whenever life felt heavy, we would sit together in that truck in the driveway. Sometimes we didn't even speak. We'd just hold hands and listen to the quiet creak of the old seats, breathing in the familiar scent of worn leather, engine oil, and the faint trace of his Old Spice aftershave. That truck carried us through it all. And Thomas made sure, in his own quiet way, that it would continue to carry me long after he was gone. He just never told me exactly how far he was willing to go to protect what mattered most. That truck wasn't just transportation. It became the quiet backbone of our entire marriage. Year after year, it carried the small, beautiful moments that wove themselves into the fabric of our lives. Thomas and I built everything around it without ever planning to. Every Saturday morning we'd drive to the farmer's market together. The bed loaded with fresh vegetables, flowers, and whatever homemade jam caught my eye. He'd always let me pick the route, even if it took longer, because he knew I loved watching the mountains roll by. On the way home we'd talk about everything and nothing. How Michael was doing in school, whether Lauren's latest drawing deserved a spot on the fridge, or what we might plant in the garden that spring. When the kids were little, that truck turned into a rolling playground. Michael learned to drive a stick shift sitting on his father's lap in the front seat when he was barely tall enough to see over the dashboard. Lauren would stretch out in the bed during summer evenings, counting stars while Thomas drove slow circles around our quiet neighborhood. Those nights still live in my memory, the warm Georgia breeze, the sound of crickets, and my husband's low laughter floating back to us. Thomas had this simple philosophy he repeated often: Ellie, anything worth having is worth taking care of. He applied it to our marriage, our home, and especially that old Ford. When the engine started knocking at 180,000 miles, he spent every weekend for 2 months rebuilding it right there in our driveway. I'd bring him sweet tea and sit on an old stool nearby, listening as he explained each part to Michael like it was sacred knowledge. Other men in town bought new trucks with fancy features. Thomas would just pat the hood of our Ford and smile. "This one's earned its place," he'd say. "Why trade loyalty for shiny new paint?" Over the decades, that truck saw us through the hard seasons too. When Thomas got laid off from the construction company in '92, it carried us to job interviews and food banks without complaint. When my mother passed, it hauled boxes of her belongings as we sorted through a lifetime of memories. It even sat patiently in the hospital parking lot during Lauren's long labor with our first grandchild. I remember one particular evening about 15 years into our marriage. We'd had one of those rare, stupid arguments, something about money or chores I can't even recall now. Instead of going inside, Thomas took my hand, led me to the truck, and we drove up to our favorite overlook without saying a word. We parked, rolled down the windows, and watched the sun disappear behind the mountains. Eventually he reached over, took my hand, and whispered, "No matter what, Ellie, this truck will always bring us back together." He was right. That old Ford became our safe place. A rolling confessional where we solved problems, celebrated small victories, and reminded each other why we chose one another. As the years passed and the kids grew up and moved out, the truck stayed. It carried us on anniversary drives, to doctor appointments as we got older, and on quiet Sunday mornings to church. The seats grew softer, the steering wheel more worn from Thomas's hands, but it never let us down. Looking back now, I realize Thomas wasn't just maintaining a vehicle. He was protecting our story. Every mile, every dent, every repaired part told the truth of a life built slowly, honestly, and with deep love. And in his final years, he made sure that story would stay protected, even from the people we loved most. 3 years ago everything changed. Thomas started coming home from the workshop earlier than usual, complaining of being bone-tired. At first I thought it was just age catching up with a man who had worked hard his whole life, but the fatigue grew deeper. He'd fall asleep in his recliner after dinner, something he never used to do. When I finally convinced him to see the doctor, the news came like a quiet storm. Advanced liver disease. The kind that doesn't give much warning and even less mercy. The specialist looked at us across the desk and said 8 to 14 months with treatment. Thomas held my hand tightly, looked the doctor in the eye, and asked only one question: what gives us the most time together, really together? We chose quality over quantity. No aggressive chemotherapy that would steal whatever strength he had left. Instead, we decided to live those remaining months fully. In public, Thomas stayed strong and calm like always. But at home he became quietly methodical. I'd catch him late at night organizing papers, updating files, making lists in his careful handwriting. He updated the insurance, made sure every bill was on autopay, and spent hours on the phone with our old friend Edward, the attorney. I thought he was simply being responsible the way he'd always been. I didn't realize he was building an invisible safety net for me. Every afternoon when he had the energy, he would go out to the driveway and sit in the truck. Sometimes he'd just rest his hands on the steering wheel and stare straight ahead. Sometimes he'd start the engine and let it idle, listening to that familiar rumble. One crisp November evening I found him there again. I climbed into the passenger seat without saying a word. We sat in comfortable silence for a long time, watching the oak leaves drift down. "Ellie," he finally said, his voice soft but steady. "This truck has carried every good thing in our life. I need you to promise me something." I turned to look at him. Even weakened by illness, his eyes still held that same quiet strength. "Promise me you'll keep her, no matter what anyone says. Not for the kids. Not because it's practical. For you. For us." I squeezed his hand. "I promise, Thomas." He nodded slowly, then added something that stayed with me. "Even if they tell you she's just an old truck taking up space. Even if Michael says it's for the best. Keep her anyway." I didn't fully understand the urgency in his voice then. I thought it was just the emotion of a dying man holding on to memories. Now I know better. He was preparing me for a battle he hoped would never come. In his final 2 weeks, Thomas grew so weak he could barely walk across the room. But one Sunday afternoon he insisted I help him outside. It took us nearly 15 minutes to reach the driveway. He was breathing hard, leaning heavily on me, but he was determined. I helped him into the passenger seat, then got behind the wheel. We sat there for over an hour, hands intertwined, saying very little. The truck felt like a sacred space one last time. "I love you, Ellie," he whispered. "Everything I've ever done, everything I'm doing now, it's all for you." He passed peacefully the next Tuesday morning with my hand in his. His last words were so faint I almost missed them. "Take care of what's yours." After the hospice nurse left and the house grew quiet again, I went outside and sat in the truck for hours. I cried until there were no tears left, breathing in the scent of him that still lingered in the upholstery. That old Ford became my last living connection to the man I loved for 48 years. I kept every promise. I started it weekly, took it for maintenance, and made sure it was always ready. Through the grief, that truck gave me purpose. What I didn't know was that while I was grieving, Thomas had been working in silence, building protections I would only discover when the people closest to me tried to take everything away. He knew our son better than I wanted to admit, and he loved me enough to prepare for the worst. The first year after Thomas passed was quiet in its own heavy way. Michael and Lauren checked on me often. The grandkids would climb into the truck bed like they always had, asking me to tell stories about Grandpa. I held on to those moments like lifelines. But then Michael met Vanessa. She was 34, sharp, beautiful, and worked in high-end real estate development in Charlotte. From the very first dinner she came to our house, I could feel the shift. She arrived in a cream-colored coat that probably cost more than my monthly expenses, her smile polite but measured. When she looked around my living room, the same furniture Thomas and I had chosen together over 40 years ago, she said, This place has such wonderful character, Eleanor. So much history. The word history landed like a gentle judgment. Michael changed faster than I expected. My son, who once spent weekends helping me in the garden, started wearing tailored shirts with logos I didn't recognize. He traded his practical SUV for a sleek German sedan. When I gently asked about it, he smiled and said, "Vanessa's helping me see things differently, Mom. In her world, image matters. It opens doors." I tried to be supportive. I really did. But I watched my warm, grounded boy slowly become someone who spoke about asset optimization and lifestyle elevation. The gentle man Thomas had raised seemed to be fading behind new ambitions. The pressure about the truck started subtly, almost innocently. At first it was small comments during Sunday visits. "Mom, that truck is just sitting there collecting dust. When was the last time you actually drove it anywhere?" Michael would ask, his tone casual. Vanessa would nod thoughtfully beside him, adding, "It's such a big presence in the driveway. It might be affecting the curb appeal if you ever think about selling the house someday." I always answered the same way, "It stays. I promised your father." They would drop it then, but the seed had been planted. Over the following months, the comments grew more frequent and more pointed. Michael started sending me articles about classic trucks losing value. Vanessa would casually mention how her clients preferred clean, modern aesthetics. One afternoon she even suggested, with that patient smile of hers, "Maybe it's time to think practically, Eleanor. Thomas wouldn't want you burdened by something so sentimental." Those words stung more than I let on. I began to feel like a guest in my own life. During their visits, I noticed Vanessa taking photos of the house and driveway when she thought I wasn't looking. Michael grew quieter around me, avoiding my eyes whenever the topic of the truck came up. The easy conversations we used to have became carefully worded discussions. Then came the day they sat me down in my living room with serious expressions. Michael wouldn't quite meet my gaze. Vanessa did most of the talking. "We've found a reputable classic car dealer," she said smoothly. "They're willing to give us an excellent trade-in value on the Ford toward a certified pre-owned Range Rover. It's the responsible choice, especially since we're thinking about starting a family soon. Safety ratings are excellent, plenty of space." I felt my chest tighten. "The truck is not for sale. It was your father's wish." Vanessa leaned forward, her voice soft but firm. "Technically, the title is still in Dad's name. As executor of the estate, Michael has certain authorities. We've spoken with an attorney. We're not trying to hurt you, Eleanor. We just want what's best for everyone." Best for everyone. The phrase echoed in my mind long after they left. That night I sat alone in the truck for hours, hands on the worn steering wheel, whispering to Thomas as if he could still hear me. "They're really going to try, aren't they?" I felt the slow unraveling of my place in my own family. The woman who had raised Michael, who had stood beside Thomas through every hardship, was now being gently, politely pushed to the side. Vanessa wasn't cruel or loud about it. She was intelligent and strategic. She made every suggestion sound logical, reasonable, and caring. That made it hurt even more. I started sleeping less. I found myself checking on the truck multiple times a day like a mother guarding a child. I considered calling Lauren in Colorado but didn't want to burden her. Instead, I kept my promise in silence, maintaining the truck exactly as Thomas would have wanted. Deep down, I knew this wasn't really about the truck anymore. It was about control. It was about erasing the old life to make room for the new one they envisioned. And I realized with a quiet ache in my chest that my son, my own flesh and blood, had chosen a path where I no longer fit neatly into the picture. What happened next tested every ounce of strength I had left. 2 days after that difficult conversation, they came back unannounced. Michael and Vanessa sat across from me in the living room again, the same polite but determined expressions on their faces. This time Michael spoke first, though his voice lacked its usual warmth. "Mom, we've made a decision. The dealer has a buyer lined up, and a beautiful 2022 Range Rover ready for trade. It's safe, modern, and practical. We're doing this for the family." I felt a cold wave wash over me. "Michael, that truck is not yours to trade." Vanessa placed a gentle hand on his arm. Eleanor, we've consulted a probate attorney. Since the original will didn't specifically mention the vehicle, it falls under the estate. As executor, Michael has the legal right to handle estate assets responsibly. I stared at my son, searching for the boy I raised. He wouldn't meet my eyes. That night I barely slept. I kept walking to the window, checking that the truck was still there under the streetlight, its faded green paint glowing softly. Around 3 a.m., I went outside and sat in the driver's seat, talking quietly to Thomas. "They're really going to do it," I whispered. "Please help me find a way." The next morning I woke at dawn, made coffee, and walked to the kitchen window like always. The driveway was empty. The truck was gone. For several long seconds I couldn't breathe. My legs felt weak. I ran outside in my nightgown and robe, the cold November air biting at my skin. Nothing but tire tracks in the gravel where it had sat for nearly 50 years. I called Michael immediately, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. "Mom, it's early," he started. "Where is the truck?" my voice cracked. He sighed, sounding almost tired. "We took it last night using the spare key. It's already at the dealership. The trade is processing today. By tomorrow we'll have the Rover. This is for the best, Mom. You'll see." He hung up before I could respond. I stood barefoot in the driveway, staring at the empty space, feeling something break inside me that I didn't know could break anymore. The one remaining piece of Thomas they had taken without warning, without respect, without even the decency of a real conversation. If you've ever been betrayed by your own child, you know this pain has a special kind of depth. It's not just loss, it's the death of trust. I called Lauren in Colorado. She was furious and wanted to fly home immediately. I told her to wait. I needed to think. For the next 2 days I moved through the house like a ghost. I called Michael 17 times. Every call went straight to voicemail. Vanessa had already blocked my number. On the third morning, while I sat at the kitchen table staring at cold coffee, my phone rang. Unknown number. Mrs. Eleanor Bennett, a young woman's voice, sounding nervous but kind. "Yes. This is Kayla from Mountain Classic Auto Traders. Your son brought in the 1978 Ford F-150 a couple days ago. Ma'am, you need to come down here right away. There's something you need to see before he returns for the Rover this afternoon." My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. "What did you find?" "You need to see it in person. Please hurry. I don't think we have much time." I drove to the dealership faster than I had driven in years. When I pulled into the lot, Kayla was already waiting outside. She was in her mid-20s, wearing coveralls, her expression serious. "Mrs. Bennett, follow me quickly." She led me through the service bay. There was Thomas's truck, hood up, glove box completely removed, part of the dashboard carefully dismantled. 3 mechanics stood respectfully to the side. Kayla guided me closer. When we started the pre-trade inspection, one of our senior mechanics noticed the glove box wasn't sitting flush. He found something hidden behind the dashboard, something your husband built himself. She pointed to a custom metal compartment that Thomas had obviously installed years ago. Inside it was a thick, waterproof manila envelope, sealed with old tape. On the front, in Thomas's unmistakable handwriting. "For Eleanor, open only if they try to take her from you." My knees buckled. Kayla caught my arm and helped me sit on a nearby stool. The mechanics gave us space. I stared at the envelope, tears already streaming down my face. This was Thomas. Even in death, he was still protecting me. With trembling hands, I opened it. With trembling hands, I broke the old tape and opened the envelope. Inside was a letter folded neatly on top of a thick stack of official documents. Kayla stood quietly beside me, one hand resting gently on my shoulder for support. The mechanics had stepped back, giving me this private moment with my husband's final gift. I unfolded the letter first. The sight of Thomas's careful, steady handwriting, the same handwriting I had seen on grocery lists and love notes for nearly 50 years, brought fresh tears. "My dearest Ellie, if you're reading this letter, then the thing I feared most has happened. Someone, most likely our son under pressure, has tried to take the truck from you. I'm so sorry you're facing this, my love. But please know I prepared for it. I've known for years that Michael is easily influenced by strong personalities. When he met Vanessa, I saw the direction things might go. I don't blame him entirely. The world today pulls hard at a man's priorities. But I made sure you would never be left unprotected. First, you'll find a revised will, properly signed, notarized, and filed with Edward 2 months before I passed. It explicitly states that the 1978 Ford F-150 belongs to you alone. It cannot be sold, traded, or transferred without your written consent. The original will is superseded by this one. Second, the title to the truck was transferred solely into your name at the same time. It has been legally yours for over 2 years. Third, I paid off our house mortgage in full using part of my retirement savings. You'll never have to worry about losing our home. And finally, the biggest protection of all, a revocable trust, one set up quietly with my brother years ago. It includes the commercial property we bought together downtown and a brokerage account that has been growing steadily. The monthly income from the leases is more than enough for you to live comfortably for the rest of your life. All of it is yours alone. The truck was never just a truck, Ellie. It was our story. Every mile we drove together, every sunset we watched from its bed, every tear and every laugh it carried. I hid this envelope where only 2 kinds of people would find it. Someone who truly loved it or someone trying to get rid of it. I gambled on human nature, and on good mechanics who inspect thoroughly. You kept your promise to me. Now I've kept mine to you. Don't let anyone make you feel small or unimportant again. You were never just my wife. You were my partner, my best friend, my home. Live fully, drive that old Ford as long as it runs, and remember that some things are worth more than anyone will ever understand. I'll be waiting for you on the other side, hood up, ready to show you around. All my love until the stars burn out. Thomas. I sat there on that metal stool in the middle of the service bay, sobbing quietly while clutching the letter to my chest. Kayla stayed right beside me, her presence steady and kind. After several minutes, I wiped my eyes and began looking through the documents. Everything Thomas wrote was there. The revised will, the title in my name only, mortgage payoff papers, trust documents, property deeds, account statements showing consistent monthly deposits. It was all real. All ironclad. Thomas had thought of everything. Even while dying, he had worked in silence to protect me from exactly this moment. Kayla spoke softly. Your husband must have loved you more than words can say, Mrs. Bennett. I've been working here 5 years and I've never seen anything like this. I nodded, still trying to steady my breathing. He did. He really did. One of the senior mechanics stepped forward respectfully. Ma'am, your son is scheduled to come back at 2:30 this afternoon to pick up the Range Rover. What would you like us to do? I stood up slowly, feeling a quiet strength I hadn't felt since Thomas passed. I'll be here when he arrives. The truck is coming home with me today. I called Edward Morrison, our longtime attorney and Thomas's closest friend. He answered on the first ring. Eleanor, I've been waiting for this call. By early afternoon, Edward arrived at the dealership with certified copies of everything. We reviewed the documents together in the manager's office. Everything was perfectly legal. What Michael and Vanessa had done could technically be considered unauthorized removal of property. But I didn't want charges. I wanted my truck back. And I wanted my son to understand the depth of what he had almost destroyed. As the clock approached 2:30, I sat calmly in the office with Edward and Kayla. My heart was steady now. The pain was still there, but something stronger had taken its place. Clarity, resolve, and the deep love of a man who had kept his final promise. The moment had come. At exactly 2:30, Michael's sleek black sedan pulled into the dealership lot. He and Vanessa stepped out looking confident, even excited. Vanessa was dressed impeccably in a tailored coat, her arm linked through Michael's. They were smiling like they had just won something important. That smile faded the moment they walked into the office and saw me sitting there with Edward and Kayla. Mom, Michael's voice faltered. What are you doing here? Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly, but she recovered quickly. Eleanor, this is really inappropriate. We've already completed the paperwork. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I simply looked at my son with the same steady love I had given him since the day he was born and said, "Sit down, both of you." Edward placed the folder of documents on the table. One by one I laid them out, the revised will, the title in my name only, the trust papers, the mortgage payoff, and finally Thomas's letter. Michael's face went pale as he read. Vanessa scanned the documents rapidly, her perfect composure cracking for the first time. "Your father knew," I said quietly. "He knew this moment might come. He prepared for it not because he didn't love you, Michael, but because he loved me enough to protect what mattered most. The truck has always been mine. Legally, emotionally, spiritually. It was never part of the estate for you to trade." Vanessa tried one last time, her voice sharp but controlled. "This is ridiculous. We were only trying to help modernize things." "No," I interrupted gently but firmly. "You were trying to erase a life you didn't value so you could build one that looked better on the outside. There's a difference between helping and helping yourselves." I turned back to Michael. His eyes were wet. For the first time in a long while I saw my son again. Not the polished version Vanessa had shaped, but the boy Thomas and I had raised. "I'm not pressing charges," I continued. "Your father wouldn't have wanted that. But the truck stays with me. The house stays with me. And the boundaries I should have set years ago are here now. I love you, Michael. But love doesn't mean I will let you take what your father left me." The room was silent except for the distant sounds of tools in the garage. Michael looked down at the letter from his father, and I saw his shoulders tremble slightly. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered. "I didn't know. I thought." "I know you didn't," I said softly. "But now you do." Vanessa stood up abruptly. "This isn't over." But her voice lacked its usual certainty. She walked out first. Michael lingered for a moment, looking at me like he wanted to say more, but couldn't find the words. He left quietly. Kayla brought the keys to the truck. I walked outside, climbed into the driver's seat of that old forest green Ford, and turned the key. The engine rumbled to life just like it always had. Steady, faithful, familiar. I drove it home the long way, windows down, past the mountain overlooks where Thomas first told me he loved me, past the hospital where our children were born, past every chapter of our life together. Lauren flew in that evening. We sat together in the truck until the stars came out, crying, laughing, and remembering. For the first time since Thomas passed, I felt truly whole again. Michael called 3 weeks later. His apology sounded genuine. I told him I loved him and that healing would take time. Vanessa filed for divorce 2 months after that. Turns out her vision of success didn't include a husband whose mother now held real boundaries and real resources. 8 months later, the truck still sits proudly in my driveway. I drive it every Sunday to church and every Saturday to the farmer's market. Sometimes I talk to Thomas while I'm behind the wheel. Sometimes I just smile and run my hand over the worn steering wheel. If you've stayed with me through this entire story, thank you. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, or struggled to hold on to what matters most, I want you to hear this: you are stronger than they think. Love, Betrayal, love, has a way of protecting its own even long after the person is gone. Type the word promise in the comments if this story touched you. Let me know I'm not alone. This is Eleanor Bennett, finally living like the woman my husband always believed I was. Drive safely, dear friend, and hold tight to the things and people that truly matter.